flex, ayy. Bumping Justin Bieber, the flavor, head left, ayy. She know what she need.
So don't worry, that was not my walkout song or my intro song. That's what you're hearing is one of the first viral AI singers. That was an AI voice, not Drake, that you're hearing. And it got so viral that this song, in the midst of legal challenge and some of the other songs were removed. So we still have this one song, thankfully. And so that voice was powered by a technology that we call the transformer model or a large language model. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So the same technology that powered that song is the technology that powered our beloved ChatGPT that I'm sure we're all very aware of at this point. So when did this all start? This started in 2017 when the first public paper on transformer models was released, and we saw a successful implementation of this new AI paradigm. And this really changed the whole game because now some key bottlenecks in AI were resolved. The primary one being AI's ability to find relationships between very many concepts at the same time. We call this the attention mechanism, and we won't dive into this too deeply. We can talk about this later during the Q&A. We'll have 2 discussion sections. But the attention mechanism, to use a metaphor, let AI break into the language side of industry, not just the numerical side or the analytics side, which has very important ramifications. So we have ChatGPT. I assume many of us use this quite regularly these days. Here we often use it for legal questions, accountancy questions internally, and we'll also use it for coding advice and stuff like that. And we'd call this the level 1 of large language models. This is a large language model that is using the attention mechanism to find relationships between concepts and paint a picture of the world like that, and can reason on the concepts that it is aware of, right? However, we can push this a lot further, and when you do that, that's when the big economic ramifications start to happen. So we're going to move into level 2 here in a second. I wanted to ask a question, actually. Who here uses GitHub Copilot for coding? Maybe people can put their hands up with the emojis. I'm quite curious to see who here uses it themselves.
Everyone's afraid to admit it.
Okay, we've got a Kreoh engineer there using GitHub Copilot. Well, so we use it extensively, and so do many other dev teams, and it is near doubling our engineering speed, because this is a large language model that is able to find the relationships between different coding concepts, different libraries, and suggest code by understanding those relationships. And at this point, this code is the way you think of it is your junior engineer that's scalable, an infinitely scalable junior engineer. Now, mind you, this is not replacing engineers anytime soon. It's not a replacement. It's actually only supercharging engineers. It is making engineers more productive and more valuable, which is great. It means less of the drudgery, less going to Stack Overflow to copy and paste for the 5th time. You know, let's admit it. We all do it. It puts that on steroids, essentially, because the way we're able to think about the relationship between our code and Stack Overflow, that's where LLMs shine. Again, that's the attention mechanism. That's one of the main breakthroughs. In the Q&A, we can talk about some of the other breakthroughs they had, like positional encoding, but we don't need to dive into that too deep. But that's one of the primary ones. That's the primary concept, is that it's unlike other AI models. It can find relationships between concepts and words. And so in this case, the words it's finding relationships between is code, which is extremely economically useful. Now, why is this level 2? That's because GitHub Copilot is an example of an advanced large language model tool that has the reasoning ability of ChatGPT, but also has the relevant knowledge and context on your coding to contribute. This is actually little known. At Kreoh, we've done some reverse engineering of GitHub Copilot to figure out exactly how it works. And this is not very publicly known or very widely known, but GitHub Copilot looks at your previously opened code pages, and it looks at the libraries that you've imported. and it takes that context to help formulate new code that is relevant. So in the example here, you can see it's suggested the code in the blue based on the comments and the previous code already in the code page. So let's move on to level 3, right? How much further can we take this? So you can give your large language model knowledge and memory to make it more powerful, but how about we give it some arms and legs too, right? Now it's not just suggesting things, it can actually take actions on your behalf. So on our team, we often use a tool called Fibery, which is like a low-code solution for your CRM or your Kanban. And here we're using AI to generate a new view for our workspace. So not only is it like ChatGPT giving us a suggestion, but it's actually putting into place some of the actions it suggests. So it's actually creating the workspace for us. It's got arms and legs. And just to pause here, because I assume this is the kind of thing that is also like seen less. Who here has actually used ChatGPT for getting coding suggestions or email writing suggestions or business suggestions? Just again, you can raise your hand in the chat. All right, so that's more. That's good. Wow. Okay, a lot of people. That's great. Yeah. Yeah. So that's great. So more than GitHub Copilot. Again, I really recommend GitHub Copilot, as if it's allowed. It really is great, and ChatGPT is a great supplement to GitHub Copilot. It's a good. You can. One favorite use case of mine is to take code that has a small nibbling error in it that's been annoying you, and throwing it at GitHub Copilot and saying, what gives? Why is it wrong? And you'll be surprised how often it can actually figure out the context, because it's unlikely that you're the first to face this issue. And you can even if you are the first, you can reason on the relationships between your code. Now, let's keep on going forward. Are there more levels? Can we go further than this? So we've given our AI arms and legs and a brain and knowledge. And some companies like Palantir have decided to give this AI guns. I don't know what level to subscribe this to, but large language models is a serious business. And so as you can see here, you have a ChatGPT-like interface that lets users of Palantir send commands for approval from their superiors and to send out reconnaissance drones, or to even request strikes on targets, right? So this is a big topic of discussion, but still from a technological perspective, a fascinating and curious development, no matter where people look at it. Now, I like to joke, level 1,000, of course. We like to give AI knowledge, like in the form of a vector database. We give it arms and legs so it can take actions. And in our recent projects, we've sometimes let our AI pipelines make pseudo-independent decisions. So in one case, we're iterating now on a second iteration of letting the AI handle logistics decisions by looking through the relevant documentation, the relevant context from the companies. Just like GitHub Copilot looks through your previous code, here the logistics AI can look at your logistics rules, laws to do with logistics, and make decisions, make calls in the supply line. And there's some other projects where we have more independently acting AIs carrying out that work, that drudgery that previously was occupying lots of hours, but now can be scaled, and people can focus on the higher value work where that is not less drudgerous. Okay, we're not actually working on on Agent Smith from the Matrix, not yet, but this is a technical word used for these. It's called LLM agents, and it's a slightly unfortunate name considering the reference to the Matrix, but we're not quite working on that third project just yet. So we can do, before we break out into some questions and answers for the first half, we can talk very briefly in this high-level overview of what a grounded large language model AI might look like. So if you imagine ChatGPT, right, that uses GPT 3.5 or GPT 4, those are our AI models here in the right. We call them foundation models. You could also imagine using an open source model or your own model, but in this diagram, we're using a foundation model like GPT 4. or another powerful competitor, Claude Plus. And you would have your user in the top left, activate an action that would be taken to your large language model processor, which could then decide whether it needs extra context, extra information to make a decision. So in this case, it might go to a AI readable database, for example, Pinecone or VV8. These are some new names. Or it could even go to a Postgres database, look for the relevant information it needs, and add that to its reasoning. And then it can go through a pipeline of chain of thought, or it can reason on things and validate its knowledge and then come back with a response to the user. So this is a very high-level overview. You can go a lot further than this, but this is what we would call a grounded AI. It's grounded in context. It's got the knowledge it needs to make relevant decisions to you. By the way, if anybody has questions, please turn on your mic and jump in. That's totally fine.
Gary, quick question on this, because the data that's in your data store, I presume that isn't then shared or used for training by GPT-4.
That's a great question. That's one of my favorite parts of large language models and this new AI paradigm, is that it doesn't have to be. So you can first off opt out of sharing data. That's thanks to some recent tussles, for example, between OpenAI and the EU and just general regulation. That's one side. And another side is with in-context learning or grounding. The AI learns the relationships in your data when it looks at it, as opposed to during a training epoch. This is important for two reasons. It's first off much more economically efficient, because we don't have to retrain the AI every time the state of nature changes, or in other words, every time data changes. And secondly, to address what you're saying, John, which is a great point, it does not mean critical data leaks from customer to customer, because the AI is only given access to the knowledge that it has the permissions to look at. Whereas if you try to train an AI on lots of knowledge, well, then you could have leak between users, right? If an AI trained on two companies' data corpuses, and both of those companies use that model, you could have leakage. Whereas if it's only allowed to use the database, the knowledge, the memory that it was assigned, then you can, with very high solidity, with high fortitude, have your one pipeline only use knowledge that is relevant to one customer and allowed for one customer, and another user only using an AI powered by knowledge that they're allowed to have access to. In Palantir's case, in the military application, this is extremely critical because obviously when you have a military hierarchy or nations working together, you can't have data leakage. And so people who have their AIs, their matching AIs, only have access to a certain amount of data. Now, we can move from here into general discussion. And I'd like to note that this slide deck was also designed by AI. Anybody have any more questions during this break?
Yeah. Hi, Eduardo here. I have a question about the legal stuff on this. So, for instance, if we ask something to an AI, let's say GPT-4, right? And I take action on what this AI recommends, who owns the responsibility on those decisions?
Okay, well, first off, just like an AI model, I will say I'm not legal counsel. but from what I've seen so far, end of day, the human is the person that takes actions and takes responsibilities. In the future, if you want to put on sci-fi hats, you can imagine AI having a corporate entity and having human rights, but you would still need to have a director for that corporate entity who would, end of day, most likely take partial liability, right? So so far, we don't have AIs taking on legal liability as a non-human entity.
Thanks.
I think we see something in the chat. There's something else. I can't quite see the messages just yet. Yeah, any more questions? Yes, I actually had some questions. I had some questions for you guys. From what you've seen so far, does anybody have like an obvious a thought where it's like this is where independent agents or grounded LLMs would be most valuable? Like, does anybody have an opinion like on what would be like a very practical application of one of these tools, or has anybody seen a very interesting application of these GPT or transformer model like tools?
So I have another one. Well, that comment was me, because sometimes when you ask something in Stack Overflow, there's a million of answers saying that, why did you ask that? So you can ask question to ChatGPT in the privacy at your home, right?
That's true. That's true.
Regarding on the, I have read articles about some people trying to set rights on the, for instance, when artists generate images using Midjourney and this kind of AI. So the copyright stuff, how it works, I've seen that in so many countries, they are like, they cannot copyright things that are AI generated. But well, that's a very gray area there, right?
You're completely right, Eduardo. And there are currently lawsuits or discussions being had that will set precedent for these things. There is, in our opinion at Kreoh, because this is a question we actually do get often, economic pressure for countries not to stomp out generative AI when it comes to copyrighted material because of international competition. One could assume that that it is, if one country really restricts access to these tools, it will fall behind in the AI race relative to other countries. That's one side. On the other hand, you have companies like NVIDIA not releasing models for text to video generation. Why? Because exactly what you just said, Eduardo, because they are not sure of the copyright ramifications, right? And there's a lot of other ramifications that are curious, like, for example, libel laws, right? Hate speech. If you release a model that is actively defaming somebody, there could be human ramifications for that, but that might be hard to control because the beauty of large language models is that it's not like a typical AI model. It is finding the relationships and concepts, and for that reason, these models, these relationships might sound like opinions, and they might even have opinions on humans. Has anybody here used Bing Chat? That's like a more advanced chat. Raise your hand if somebody here has used Bing Chat. All right, okay. So Bing Chat is known for having strong opinions and sometimes defaming people, which it is a legal question, right? And so you've got legal gray areas like copyright. You got legal gray areas like libel. However, there are great, but when you have advanced AI pipeline tools and we combine many AI models together, you can help restrict this. So we personally, as a team, we typically work on workflow automation. So we very much avoid the copyright issue almost always. We also have tools in place that, if needed, can check whether content passes plagiarism checks. I mean, we didn't build those tools. There's also open source versions, to be honest. It's a very obvious tooling. And finally, there's also, you can use AI tooling to help increase security. This is a whole new industry being born on top of large language models, is large language model security. So alignment research, large language model cybersecurity, and large language model legal security. These are new industries being born right now, and a very fun space, very interesting. There's lots that can be done to make your AI more secure and safer. That's OpenAI is doing big leaps and bounds in this area.
Gary, there's a question there from Andrei Charashesh about Andrei, do you want to talk? Do you ask your question?
Oh, it wasn't a question from my side. I know that Gary asked if you know any tools or any interesting topics that the large language models can tackle.
Andrei, I love that suggestion. That's actually one of my favorite applications of large language models specialized in code, because it's a brilliant example of grounded large language models, right? You've already written the code, it has the context it needs, and now it can write unit tests on that code. This works very well using GitHub Copilot. Sorry. This works very well if you're using text-to-code models. And this could even be done using ChatGPT as well, in an ungrounded capacity. You could even push this further. There is opportunity for somebody to build a tool set that really does this. Like they just take your entire code repository and give you full code coverage. So there is space for somebody to build tools in this area, but there already are things you could use yourself. That's a great application. Thank you, thanks, Andre. And we often do this. So our unit tests are, you know, very, very often written by GitHub Copilot and then checked and improved by humans. And GitHub Copilot's code is like, you know, we code review it, and it is truly impressive outputs. Again, you still need an engineer to be able to put this all together. End of day, it's kind of like having the documentation for every library on your fingertips. You still have to code once you've read the documentation. By the way, this is a halfway mark, so we will have more discussion at the end as well. After this, we're going to dive into some development patterns, just a few examples of tips and tricks on how you can really get more out of large language models today. So very concrete examples. But before we go into that, are there more questions, or for example, an idea on like, oh, this would be great in the medical industry, or maybe this would be good in the mining industry? To touch on Eduardo's earlier point, the fact that OpenAI and Google and Meta have not yet been sued is a good indicator towards legal precedent being partially set already, that this is going to be part of social life. And for the US in particular, there's little incentive to stop this, because if they do, well, then we'll do it in Germany or we'll do it in China, and then they'll be behind. There's a startup in the YC cohort right now, actually, that I believe is working on these kind of toolings where they read your entire code repository and they supplement it. It's called Build. That's Build with a T. That being said, unit tests, pretty high quality unit testing can be achieved with using ChatGPT with GPT-4 and using GitHub Copilot. So we personally just use those. All right, we can move on to some development patterns and do some Q&A. All the references that you guys see in the footnotes, that's all going to be in the bibliography at the end. So all these things are sourced. There's some research papers that are mentioned throughout the presentation that you guys can also source for those of us that you know want to get really nerdy and go deep into the papers. So let's continue. So yes, this slide deck itself was actually AI generated. It was generated on gamma.app. Obviously, I wrote the content and did the research for it, but I hate designing slides. I don't like choosing fonts. And so here you see an example of myself talking to an AI chatbot. I'm saying, add a card with multiple images presented together in a funky design. And here we have my polite teammate, AI teammate, putting it together for me. So if you remember the slide with the AI agents above, that was the slide you see here generated by the AI is what I used to start. So I suggested a title, suggested a caption, and it gave me nice image formatting. Oh, I see somebody else put in a message. Yes, that's a good point, Andrew. I'm super excited for GitHub that's really going to make us developers even more productive. And that's great. I love to see AI like this. It's here to make you more productive and to remove the drudgery. And it's not actively seeking to supplement you or to replace you. And you know, programming is one of those things where there's an infinite potential for programming technology in society, right? So until everything is free, there's always going to be technology that needs to be programmed. On to the next slide. So yeah, this tool, I really had fun using this. Saved me a lot of time. I personally do not enjoy choosing fonts or moving images around or trying to find the perfect stock image. So the AI was picking great stock images for me, like the matrix picture. That was the AI that found it. Okay, so here's a research paper that I'm a big fan of from sourcearchive.org. Great place to find research papers on computer science in general and large language models. We have a reading group here in Dublin where all of the AI nerds, we meet up and we present research papers to each other. And here's one that we really enjoyed, chain of thought prompting. So this is something you can apply today, either when talking to ChatGPT when talking to GPT-4, or when building prompt pipelines or agent pipelines in your dev work, right? So if you decide to incorporate GPT-4 into your dev pipeline, you could use chain of thought to improve the quality of your outputs. So here we have two examples. We have standard prompting. We have standard prompting. We call this a single shot approach, a one-shot approach. You give one example to the AI, and you expect it to instantly learn the pattern on how to solve these questions, and then it tries to solve these questions. And here you can see it's a common sense problem, right? It's a maths problem. It has to understand the relationship between how many tennis balls are in a can and the fact that, well, multiple cans means more table tennis balls, right? Not table, just tennis balls. And once it understands the relationship, it can answer that question. The thing is, it's rushing a little bit, and in the first area, it gets it wrong because it didn't spend enough time thinking about the relationship between cans and tennis balls. Now, in the second example, when we teach the AI in context how to solve this problem, we don't tell it to rush ahead. We tell it to break down its thinking. You can think of this as, I imagine many people here would have probably taught maths when they were younger to a younger sibling or to somebody as a tutor. When you teach a teenager to do maths, often their accuracy improves when you tell them to write out their steps, right? When I was younger, I used to teach lots of maths grinds. I was a one-on-one tutor in maths all throughout my teenage years. And this really improved the outputs of teenagers. And likewise, making the AI show its work also improves its outcomes. In this case, the models used are a smaller GPT model, an open source one, and this was research conducted earlier this year. And if you want to read more about this paper, it's in the bibliography at the end. They have multiple examples where they try this method on the popular common sense data set, usually used to evaluate the strength of large language models. And here it gets the right answer. By the way, again, jump in if you have any questions about this. So you can use this today to improve your prompting in ChatGPT. Tell it to show its work. Now, this is a more advanced technique. So as we mentioned in the beginning, GitHub Copilot and other tools like Harvey and whatnot, they have long-term memory. So they have large knowledge bases that aren't in the foundation model training data and therefore don't leak. Something that John pointed out there. It's in its database, and it's an AI readable database. The same way you could have memory in your own long-term memory. And so that really improves the outputs of AIs because now it has knowledge. And when you have knowledge, you can reason and problem solve a lot better. Thing is, having knowledge is easier said than done, right? There's many ways you can go and catch that knowledge or find that knowledge. So there's a whole industry, and actually it's currently a multi-billion industry in terms of just market capitalization. The companies providing memory AI readable databases are actually raising humongous rounds right now. Like some of them have already reached near unicorn valuations in some of the highest record speeds. It's, in my opinion, slightly insane how fast they raised. But there could be reason to this. And so there are many companies entering this competitive space. One of our favorites is Weaviate. That's the example you're seeing here. Weaviate lets AIs use specialized AI algorithms to search a vector database. That's like an AI readable database to find the knowledge it needs to answer questions correctly. So here we have a human question. Who is the king of the Netherlands? And we're looking for summaries of articles that we have in the AI's memory to go address this question. When we find the summary that we are happy with, we will bring back other metadata, like who published this article that landed in our memory, and of course, the title of the article that we use as our knowledge source, and finally the answer. What happens here is quite beautiful. The AI uses a concept called embeddings and a similarity comparison to find the most relevant information. It might find 10 of its most relevant articles from its long-term memory. It will take that information, ask questions about it as an AI, all extremely fast, like faster than you could even notice as a human, and it will answer that question via its own reasoning. So an AI will look at the sources it's gathered in its memory, reason on those sources, and give you the answer, which the answer is King William Alexander. And then as metadata, it'll tell us, by the way, the source I thought was most reliable for this information was The Economist. And here's the title.
Gary, could I ask a question? Is this the means by which hallucinations are reduced?
Yes, that's one of the means. There's many methods. We will be launching more guides on how to reduce hallucinations. But you're bang on, John. This is actually a great method to reduce hallucinations. One research paper calls this method reasoning with retrieval. So, prove your work, and then you can't hallucinate as much. There's other ways to reduce hallucination. You can have multiple AIs work together to verify each other's work. There's also sanity checks you can carry out both through classical data science methods, classical business logic methods, or by using other large language models. So there's many methods, and one of which is this, yes, rethinking with retrieval. So you're absolutely right, John. Any other questions or statements about this example here? I think this is quite a fascinating example.
Okay.
All right. So we can move on here. This, so the example tooling here is Weaviate. This is actually open source, but they've raised a very large round on their technology stack. One could assume that with the spreading popularity of their open source tooling, they can become well-positioned professional services providers in this space. The competitors would include Pinecone. They were one of the first in this space, but they're not open source. And then there's maybe 5 or 6 other companies trying to compete in this exact area right now. So it's a very lucrative area, but it's also an arms race. Finally, we can jump into more discussion and resources and bibliography. So, some of the resources you might see here might motivate more questions or discussion, and I am more than happy to talk about some of the guts, the nitty-gritty of how transformer models work, what makes them so much more advanced than the previous favorites, recurrent neural networks, which were, doing all the rounds in the 2015 and stuff. But this is so much stronger than recurrent neural networks. So really happy to jump into that. And here we have some of the first sources.
Gary, could you outline or just give a high-level overview of when we met? You explained that project that you're involved in regarding reading invoices and trying to assess, what the duty or excise duty is based upon the model understanding legislation. So could you just maybe explain that a little bit?
That's a great question. And very happy to. I can't go into extensive detail, but there's some parts that I am allowed to discuss from our previous iteration on this. So if we jump in here, yes, a technique that we used was a combination of a grounded LLM and an LLM agent. So we have an LLM agent that constantly observes EU and UK laws on customs and excise, which gives it the knowledge it needs to be an effective decision maker in this area. When we receive an invoice, we can use our LLM agents to carry out the correct decision in processing this. And I can't really dive in past this, but we use that to carry out the correct logistics decisions. So it actually takes independent action using its knowledge. So it's an example I'm very happy with of an LLM agent and a grounded AI working together. There's other parts in the bibliography. For those of you that were intrigued by the AI song, there is a GitHub library in the resources section. It's called Suno AI/Bark. They call the model Bark. And it is a very impressive text-to-voice or text-to-singing model that you can play around with yourself. There's some very funny AI examples that they provide of text-to-voice that they did. There's some other resources as well. Archive, great resource for computer science. OpenAI just released a training course with Andrew Ng he's obviously very, very known and loved for his previous ML courses. So yeah, if there's more questions, please do ask.
I think that we have like a great responsibility here on learning how to use these tools in the right way, because well, I'm going to send you to the chat a link of Casey that Samsung bans the use of AIs like ChatGPT because of the misuse of these tools. And I think that the thing was that it was like filtering information. So we need to know on how to use these tools properly.
That's a good question. And actually, this is a mistake some businesses might make. You're right. If by default, you might leak information if you've stated the default settings. So what you have to do, for example, in OpenAI's case, if you're using OpenAI as your technology provider for your foundation model of choice, then in those settings, you really ought to set don't use my data for training, right? And then that data stays yours. And they've had to include this because of, many reasons, one of which is EU law, which has forced them to include this, right? So since they've been forced to do this, we can avail of this. Another alternative is there are models that are almost as powerful as OpenAI's models, and in some cases better at some tasks, that are open source or self-hostable, self-trainable, that a company that is really sensitive about privacy might be able to host and use themselves. And so that way, well, nobody except for you is touching that data. I mean, not even you, really.
We've only about 3 minutes left. There's another question from Andre Cherichet. Andre, do you want to just ask it again? Can you see the question, Gary? Do you think that sparse attention? Yeah.
That's hard to say. This is if I could predict this, I would be an extraordinarily rich man. It's hard to know.
Could you even explain the question? I don't know what it means.
I'm assuming you mean this is to do with vector databases, right? With sparse with sparse attention to vectorized memory, right? We have dense search and we have sparse search. That's the context I'm taking this in, but there might be a different context.
Take it that context.
Okay. Again, I can't. Yeah, that's a hard question to answer. To be honest, I'm not sure if I can fully answer that. But again, whether you will see local models used for most of the LLM workload, Google just released a statement there. An internal document got leaked that they seem to think that self-hostable models will be eating everybody's lunch in terms of whoever's been building these foundation models, which would be great for democratizing these tools. If we can self-host these tools and the state of the art is available to everybody, that would really democratize these tools. It could also be very dangerous because that means unaligned AIs could be released into the public. Another angle is these mechanisms might not be as powerful as we think they are, and there might be some secret sauce that OpenAI or Cohere and Anthropic have, and therefore they might have an advantage. They might be 2 years, 3 years ahead of the state of the art. The answer to this question has serious economic ramifications, and we don't know yet, in my opinion. That's a great question. Well, AI's been a huge part of the global economy already for a long time. We have experienced explosions in AI development like this before, with then what we call AI winters, right? So you would have new models dropping and everybody losing their minds because they think, oh my God, the graph goes up, so therefore it's going to go up forever, and therefore it's going to become a singularity, and then we have a plateau, right? That happened with RNNs, and it might happen here. But one thing's for sure is that AI as a concept, unless we actively decide to nuke all of our computer servers, is likely a part of modern society. Carolina, you got a question?
Yes, thanks, Gary. First of all, thank you for a great talk. I think our nerdy neurons have been sufficiently stimulated here, and the weights are increasing when it comes to our knowledge of AI. So thank you for that. I'm head of design, but again, with keen interest in AI, and I can completely see where you're coming from when you talk about that hype cycle. I think when I hear the voices, we are so close singularity. Next 5 years, I tend to be quite skeptical. Tell me, in your words, and bring it back to humans, right? When people come to you and they say, well, the AI is going to take all our jobs away, what do you say to that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and also some very good points made there. I totally agree. This question has a technological and a social aspect to it, right? Very much my opinion on the social aspect. And the social aspect is that until goods are free, until services are free, there's always marginal economic rent to be made. As long as there's marginal economic rent to be made, that means people can make livings, right? And that can be distributed according to how equal your society is, different subject. And so as long as goods aren't free, there's always work. And that's maybe like a classical economic opinion, separate to technology, I guess. But these things do inform technological decisions. On the technological side of things, if AI were able to do economic rent-seeking activity better than humans right now, well, then we would notice. Capitalism as it is would be over, because if the AI is able to make stock trading decisions better than humans in a consistent way, not just you train the model and now it's beating the market for a little bit and then the market adjusts, right? That's where we're at now. But when you have a model that beats the market adjusts and it learns to beat the market again, and it keeps on doing that. Well, at that point, whoever releases that AI into the public will outtrade everybody, or at least compete with other AI models, and will gather insane amounts of capital to the point that stock markets are controlled by AIs. And we'll notice. I don't think that's going to happen, in my opinion, yet. And if it does, well, it's been a good run. We can all enjoy either death or utopia. So
brilliant. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary, for the presentation. Thank you, guys, for all the questions. We have to close now because we have another call. So thanks so much. I will be sending the link to the recording to everyone. So
thank you, guys. You guys have been great. This is an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Likewise. Thank you, Gary. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Gary. Bye.